Also joining us on the dais, Shri Suhail Ajaz Khan, our ambassador to Saudi Arabia, as well as Shri Asim Raja Mahajan, Joint Secretary of the Gulf Division in the Ministry. Sir, may I hand over the floor to you for your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, friends. First of all, welcome for this press briefing on the visit of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, who was on his second state visit to India. He had arrived, as you know, on 9th morning, and he was accompanied by a high-level delegation comprising of almost 14 members and 8 ministers. And the context of the visit was, of course, the participation in the G20, but also to have the first to co-chair the first Leaders Summit of the Strategic Partnership Council, which was established, as you all know, between the two countries in October 2019, when Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi had visited Riyadh. So today the Crown Prince was accorded ceremonial welcome at the Rashtrapati Bhavan at the forecourt, and after that we had the Prime Minister hosted the Crown Prince for the restricted level discussions, followed by the Strategic Partnership Council meeting, as I mentioned, and then the Prime Minister also hosted a luncheon and a working lunch, for him. Thereafter, now in the evening, the Crown Prince would call on the Rashtrapati, and the Rashtrapati ji would also be hosting a banquet, and thereafter the Crown Prince is expected to depart this evening itself. So at the outset of the discussions which we had in the morning, the Crown Prince congratulated India for a very successful G20 meeting with lots of major outcomes in that meeting. The Prime Minister also acknowledged that the kingdom had been very actively participating in the G20 meetings, and especially the two sides expressed their happiness at the launching of the India-Middle East Economic Corridor as one of the major outcomes of the G20 under India's presidency. The Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, also congratulated the kingdom on becoming a full member of the BRICS, of course, as a follow-up of their membership in the SCO. Thereafter, the two sides had long discussions. The Crown Prince went on to mention that India and Saudi Arabia have a long history of friendship over several hundreds of years, and no instances of any differences or conflict. That kind of bonhomie he was emphasizing. He also mentioned that both the kingdom and India are the two fastest economies, were the two fastest economies in 2022 last year, and continues to be so. And it is expected that the two countries would remain, the leading economic growth countries of the world for the next 1 decade or so. And so there are so many different areas in which the two countries could cooperate, and the two sides identified areas such as energy cooperation, defense, security, education, technology, transportation, healthcare, tourism, and culture. Both sides also identified space and semiconductors as other areas of cooperation. They agreed to diversify the current status of their hydrocarbons relationship into a comprehensive energy partnership. Both sides, Prime Minister as well as the Crown Prince, extended their full support to the early implementation of the West Coast refinery projects, which, as you know, is a trilateral cooperation between Aramco, ADNOC, and the Indian companies, for which funds to the tune of $50 billion are already earmarked. Now, the new thing which has come up is that the two sides agreed to set up a joint task force to help in identifying and channelizing the 100 billion investments which was actually promised by the Saudi side, half of which was for the refinery, and again to have a monitoring committee to ensure that the progress in these refinery projects are done as per the plans laid out by both sides. Discussions also revolved on the grids, various types of grids like power grid, gas grid, water grid, optical fiber network, so that the two countries could cooperate. Another important element was that the two sides also agreed to expedite the India GCC FTA negotiations, which they felt would act as a catalyst for further strengthening our economic cooperation between the two sides. They also agreed to strengthen cooperation in the fintech field and also explore trading in the local currencies. This was discussed. The two leaders expressed their satisfaction at the volume of trade, the trade level with both countries have reached, India being the second largest trading partner of Saudi Arabia and Saudi being the fourth largest trading partner of India. Again, the Prime Minister also laid emphasis on certain sectors, and he mentioned certain sectors for cooperation. So he mentioned critical minerals as one area. Food security is another area which was mentioned, especially it is of Saudi interest, creation of food parks and other things. Since we have a very good startup ecosystem in India, Prime Minister emphasized on the need for setting up a startup bridge between India and Saudi Arabia. On the education and education field, the Prime Minister, in the light of the new education policy, emphasized on the need for strengthening cooperation in this sector, particularly in the student exchange program and university to university and institution to institution level collaborations. And he also suggested, our Prime Minister suggested that a joint working group on education and skill development could be set up to kind of explore this. Also in the context of culture and people to people, the cooperation in the field of film making also came up. So both sides agreed that this is another area where we can work together. I'm happy to share with you that during this visit, as many as 8 agreements have been signed. And the important ones, or I would just read out to you, is agreement 1 is the field of energy, which was signed by the Saudi Minister of Energy and our Minister of New and Renewable Energy. Then there was an agreement between the agreement in the field of digitalization and electronic manufacturing between the IT ministries of both sides. There was one agreement between the CVC of India and its counterpart, the Saudi Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority. And the fourth agreement was between the National Archives. Then there was an agreement between the two investment entities, that is the Invest India on the Indian side and the Ministry of Investment on Saudi side. There was another agreement between the two Exim banks. There was also another agreement between the small and medium enterprises banks of two sides, that is SIDBI and the SME Bank of Saudi Arabia. And the last one was in the field of desalination. In addition to these, there are several other agreements which are under various stages of discussion. The prominent one is the one on grid connectivity, which is in the advanced stages of discussion. We are also separately discussing with the Saudi side a visa waiver agreement for diplomatic passports, which is not yet ready, but we hope that it would be ready soon. So these were some of the main points which had come up for discussions during this. The strategic partnership meeting took place in a very amicable and cordial manner, where the two leaders recognized the efforts made by the respective ministers. You know that it had two verticals, two headed by the foreign ministers and the other one headed by our commerce and industry minister and Saudi Minister of Energy, and the other SOMs and other joint working groups. They agreed to have the meeting at regular frequency. The next one would be in Riyadh, hopefully next year. So this is in some the parameters and contours on which the discussions have taken place. And the two sides have worked out a joint statement which will be released soon, and you will be able to access it later in the evening after the end of the visit. So these have been the outcomes. The minutes of the first leaders summit were also signed by the two leaders, our Prime Minister and the Crown Prince. And these are the minutes of, encompassing all the, discussions which had taken place and the sums of this. So that was also one of the things which was done. So that's about it. Is there anything? Yeah, so.
Thank you very much, sir. Before I open the floor for questions,
I would also just like to one point I say. There was also on the sidelines of this investment forum which took place, which was organized with 5 key themes. Again, ICT and entrepreneurship, chemicals and fertilizers, advanced manufacturing, food security, energy and sustainability. It was a joint event, but mainly the lead being taken by their Ministry of Investment and also supported by Invest India and FICCI. And we believe that several agreements in the private sector have been signed during they're still going on. It will end, I think, in another couple of hours' time. So, yes.
Thank you, sir. I understand that had more than 500 participants in that, with a very large contingent from Saudi Arabia. Before I open the floor, ground rules, please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. Otherwise, do start. Yeah, I'll start with you. I saw your hand first.
Question for the Secretary,
Please.
Reza from the Hindustan Times. Here.
Oh, yes, sir.
Question for the Secretary. Basically, there were reports about some problems with the site for the West Coast refinery. Is that still an issue? And if we could just get an idea why it's taken so long for this, although we had COVID in between, why it's taken so long for this $100 billion proposal to move forward?
Okay, there was another hand. Huma, come to you. Huma, go ahead.
Sir, I'm Huma Siddiqui from the Financial Express. Just wanted to know, when will the negotiations for the India GCC FTA start? I mean, there have been meetings before, but what's the status now? And can I ask?
So sorry, Huma, was that be part of this visit in any which way?
He said that they talked about India
kind
GCC.
of,
Generally, okay, fair enough. And
Just one
yeah,
more,
sure. This is
also about the space cooperation. In the morning, they announced that India and Saudi are in talks about space
cooperation.
Yes.
Okay, Vishal, I'll come to you guys. What?
सर मैं विशाल पांडे हूँ जी न्यूज से। मेरा सवाल है इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर को लेकर। इधर सर, ये इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर की घोषणा के बाद पहली मुलाकात हुई है प्रधानमंत्री और क्राउन प्रिंस के बीच में। भारत के लिए कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है ये इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर, और क्या इसे चीन के बीआरआई का जवाब भी माना जा रहा है?
ये मतलब कौन मान रहा है, आप? Anyway, next, yeah, go ahead. No, yours, yeah.
Sir, I'm Sahil from Asian News International, ANI. You spoke about the defense collaboration as well. Can you elaborate on that, sir? What aspects were discussed?
Take one more question here. I'll come to you. Siddhant. Yeah, I'll just come to you.
Hi, sir. Siddhant from Vion. Sir, you talked about national currencies being discussed, trading in national currencies. If you can give details. Also, there are many Indians in Saudi Arabia, blue-collar worker, about their situation. Was this part of the conversation as well? We saw the Prime Minister talking about taking care of Indians. So if you can elaborate on that.
We'll take another round. I think there are still many questions. So we'll hand over these 5 questions to you.
Thank you. Reza, your question on the West Coast refinery. Of course, there had been delays, since it was announced, but then there were many reasons. You also mentioned about COVID and other things. See, today's focus was how we could expedite this, And so the whole idea was that a joint working group or a committee would kind of go into all the facets of this and then see ways and means of expediting this. And both sides are very keen that this is realized sooner than later. So I think the approach was forward-looking, and the commitment of the two leaders and and also the guidelines to the respective ministries was that one should work together to find out how best we could expedite this. So all aspects will be discussed in this, and then as and when details come up, we'll certainly share with you. On the India GCC FTA, you see, one of the primary reasons why there was a delay was that there was a change in the chief negotiators. Now that the chief negotiator of the GCC has been appointed, earlier the terms of reference had been exchanged. Now the two sides would go into those terms of reference, and now that the chief negotiator has also been appointed, I think the negotiations would be brought back on track, and I would say fast track, since there is a keenness on both sides to to complete these negotiations as early as possible. Space cooperation emphasis was given by both the leaders, and these were identified as the key areas, especially in the context of India's, first and foremost, what are developments and the Chandrayaan launch and many other things. But just to give you as a background that the two countries, the two sides have exchanged a countrywide agreement. This was exchanged a few months ago, and these agreements are under the discussion. And once this has been signed, earlier there used to be only agreements on the institution level, like ISRO with the Saudi Space Commission. Now we are talking about a countrywide agreement, and space cooperation remains a key, one of the key areas of cooperation between our two countries. Economic corridor, the two sides, as I mentioned, recognize this as one of the major outcomes of the G20. It is one of the biggest such plurilateral agreement you could think of, connecting several countries. So it is, I'm sure it is not, we cannot, you are putting this thing is against some country or that, we don't see it. It is actually basically connecting our like-minded partner countries and in different geographic zones, which is extremely important, Asia with Middle East and Europe, and such kind of thing. And if you are reading the press and if you have read the what has come up also in our own press releases and other thing, you realize the dimension of it. So it is something which we are all looking forward to, and it would need close coordination and work with all the partner countries in that. Defense cooperation. We have an ongoing defense cooperation which is going on very well. We already had 2 rounds of we had the joint naval exercises. We are now exploring the possibility of taking these joint exercises to other domains, other than the naval. Then the other important aspect is the joint collaboration in terms of, defense manufacturing. This is something which both sides are keen about. The Saudi side also has a inbuilt, local manufacturing focus in their Vision 2030, and our companies have also shown interest in showing their capabilities depending on the needs and capabilities, matching the both sides. And if you recollect, in October 2019, when Prime Minister was visited there, there was an agreement which was signed on defense, cooperation between the manufacturing sector. So this is going on. We would expect more such exercises and more involvement of Saudis in bilateral and multilateral exercises. Siddhant, you asked about the national currencies. The two sides have started discussing this. It is only at the discussion stage. Proposals and concept notes have been exchanged. The Saudi side is aware that we have we have worked out similar arrangements with other countries in the region. So the discussions will be beginning, or it already begun. Then in the blue-collared workers, Prime Minister emphasized the large number of Indian workers there, and also thanked the Saudi side for specifically taking care of them in difficult situations such as COVID. One of the things which was suggested also, this joint working group on skill development would also in a way affect the way the recruitment is done, and it also would go a long way in ameliorating whatever the recruitment conditions are there. And that we have been separately at the local levels discussing with the Saudi embassy and the Saudi labor and health attaches to see how best we can streamline the process of recruitment. Some of aspects of what you have asked may also be there in the joint statement.
Next. Next round of question. Suhasini? Yeah.
Thank you, Secretary. This is Suhasini Haider from The Hindu. I just wanted to pick up on the answer you had given on IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, as it is called. In terms of details of where the funding for this, because trade has always gone through these routes, where funding for this is going to come from, Has there been any clarity? Because we haven't seen it in the White House's fact sheet, nor have we seen it in any of our... so did the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, discuss this aspect at all? And I just wanted to clarify one thing. The US President Joseph Biden said yesterday in Vietnam that we're going to have a new railroad from India all the way across to the Mediterranean. I presume this is incorrect, but I just wanted to clarify if the plan is for India to be connected by the railroad as well, and is India building the railroad? Thank you.
Manas?
This is Manas from PTI. My question is related to defense again.
Microphone.
So was there any specific discussion on co-development or co-manufacturing of any specific platform or equipment? And second question is that in fact, recently the Chinese foreign minister said that the China brokered Saudi-Iran deal is making waves of reconciliation in the Middle East. So are you concerned about it, the growing proximity between Saudi Arabia and China, and then China's growing influence, and was it any way in fact discussed in the talks? Thank you.
Sudhi? Yeah, I'll come to you. Oh, sorry.
Sir, Shruti Rajan from Bloomberg. Yes, sir. Sir, if you could give us a little more detail on the West Coast refinery taking up from Raza. Is there a timeline that has been set? When can we see it? Is there a decision that it needs to be put on the ground by X number of dates? Any detail that you could give us, sir?
Yeah. Sir, this is Manish Kumar Jha from Financial Express. You spoke about a $100 billion investment, possible investment, an ongoing investment in India. I understand which is largely focused on refinery so far. I would like to know possibly if you could talk about the range of other potential investment and talks underway with India from Saudi Arabia.
For the 100 billion?
Yeah, okay. In some data, some figure, how much has been done. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
So Meghna Dev from DD News. I have a question on what are the discussions going on under green connectivity, and also an additional question on desalination.
Under green connectivity.
Under green connectivity. Yeah. And on desalination plants, are we also looking at PPP models, and what is the agreement about, if you can give us some details?
Desalination plants. Okay, if there's just one more couple of questions, then we'll take it in this round and close it. Yashi, go ahead.
This is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. Can you elaborate a bit on the grid, what is it called? The grid cooperation on the grid I'm stuck with that word.
Grid interconnection.
Yeah, grid connection. And also, is it on the discussion stage, or is there already a route wherein you've decided which countries to take this grid connectivity from? And secondly, who all are these delegates comprising of? Are they from a particular sector, or are they from across different industries?
Delegates for what?
They said 500 delegates have come.
Oh, business.
Yeah,
Businessmen. That's not business forum. It's a business delegation that came on that business forum, which is quite successful. I think we leave that. Yes. You have more questions? Then hold on. I think I'll stop. We'll take another round, because I think that you can't pop in last minute. Sir, I think what we'll do is there'll be another round. So if you could take these questions, you have already.
So I'm taking the first question from Swasni. I don't think anything on the funding aspect of this was discussed, and I think to me it appears also too early, because it's just been signed. So but whatever is put on the domain, and I think you would have already seen it. But further details of funding, who would put what, that I think it is kind of too early. Now the second is. The connection, India would be connected by railroads, perhaps is a correct interpretation, rather than India building the railroads. That's just, but still. So this is there because I think the India Middle East interconnectivity, as we understand, and during the discussions, so the various forms of connectivity, ports, railways, better better roads, grades, all those things which I mentioned in my opening remarks. So that is the overall thing. Funding, nothing has been discussed so far. Manas from PTI, the co-development and co-manufacturing. You see, there are no specific platforms, no specific items for co-manufacturing discussed. Discussion has been exploring what could be done based on each other's acceptability and the technologies available. So again, it is not specific to any particular platform. You have mentioned about the Saudi-Iranian deal. We are happy that such a deal has happened, but then why would be really concerned about this thing? We have very good relations, as you know, with all the Middle Eastern countries, GCC countries, and the Arab League countries, which is reflected in many different ways, and you have been seeing it. And this major in India Middle East economic corridor itself is a reflection of our relationship. So this is the thing. So we need not every time draw connectivity here and there in a different form. West Coast Refinery, you have asked. Again, the ministries of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas and the Ministry of Energy, the officials would sit together. And as I said, the teams have been assigned the task of sitting together and listing out, are there any anything which is hindering early implementation, or are there ways in which this thing could be expedited? So that instruction the two leaders have given today, and I do hope that in the coming days and weeks, something would the two sides would do. Now, the $100 billion of investment, one question was, I think you asked the areas. Just to mention that the Prime Minister listed the following areas where Saudi investments could be made. One was tourism, waterways, expansion of railways and freight corridors, highway infrastructure, ports, energy, hydrogen, and especially the production of equipment for electrolysis, gas grids, optical fiber. These are some of the areas, but I also mentioned to you in the beginning the areas of focus of the two countries too. So these are there, and which would also include renewable energy and energy, IT related infrastructure. So there are many areas. So while half of the investment was dedicated for the refinery, the other half could be utilized for all these investable projects if the two sides are able to identify. Similarly, I think the discussions are going on between the two sides on both this green connectivity and desalination and other things. The specific elements of such cooperation have not been identified in so much of detail. And again, in the days to come, we will be in a position to kind of identify specifically which kind of projects which both sides will be able to invest into. Is there anything which I'm missing? I think
the green connectivity, desalination, and the grid. Yes, she had a query. Grids.
Yes, you see the one which we are discussing with Saudi Arabia is basically on the electrical interconnection, the areas of cooperation, and then of course there are elements in that. Since this is still an agreement under discussion, I would not like to give too much of details because still the two sides are discussing it. But I do hope that once it is finalized in the coming days, we would be very happy to share with you more details.
Desalination, was there a question? I'm not particularly sure. Green connectivity and desalination. Meghna asked. Oh, there's Meghna. Okay. Just give us a second. I think there was a few agreements that have been signed. And on the query regarding Suhasini, it was your query about President Biden something?
Okay,
Look, without seeing the full text, I don't think we should be commenting on it. I think Sarah has already clarified.
One thing on desalination is once we have signed this today, the agreement MOU on desalination. Now this MOU includes cooperation in the fields of future technologies, in the field of seawater desalination, investment exchanges in desalination industries like solar desalination, exchange of expertise, joint research and capacity building. And we do believe that both sides will be able to enhance their cooperation, ongoing cooperation in desalination, seawater desalination through this MOU.
Details will make public.
Details will make public.
Anything else on that one we had said? Just to add, Manesh, to, if I could, sir, on your query on the discussions or the deal that you mentioned, Manesh, about China brokered or whatever Saudi Iran thing. Look, I think we made our position clear on this one earlier, and I don't think we have anything much to add. I think we said something about, look, you know our good relations with various countries in West Asia. We have deep abiding interests, as you saw, in the region, and we have always advocated dialogue and diplomacy as the way to resolve differences, and I think we'll reiterate that position on that. Let me open the floor for more questions. Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Saud from Saudi Al Watan, Delhi.
Yeah.
My question is, what is the most important outcome of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Delhi? And my second question is, how deep Saudi-India relations so far?
How deep?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had query. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Megha from NewsX, and you mentioned about a discussion being had between Prime Minister Modi and Mohammed bin Salman about visa waivers. If you could give us more details.
No, okay. Yeah, okay, Kalol, I'll come to you. You also?
Kalol from the Hindu, sir. As we know that there are reforms that are taking place in Saudi Arabia in various sectors of life. So when you engage the Saudi government or the Crown Prince, do issues like gender justice and considerate treatment of Indian convicts in Saudi prisons, and do such issues figure in your discussion with the Saudi authorities?
May I say which such issues?
Like
two issues
gender
on
justice and
treatment
human rights
of Indian citizens are very different issues. But anyway,
well,
I'll leave it for Secretary.
There are Indian citizens of the prisons.
I agree. You heard Prime Minister talk about it, and I'm sure Secretary will add to that.
So,
yeah,
and also
another question.
In addition to it, you have done an agreement on the archives. So what sort of access are you going to give the Saudi authorities to Indian archives? Because Indian archives are truly priceless.
Thank you for that very strong support for our archives. I appreciate that. Yeah, next. Yeah, I'll come back to you. Yes, I'll come.
Sandhya with ET. Quickly, just want to have some sense around the discussion around semiconductors. And I would like to know if our flagship project, UPI, was discussed and if there is any movement forward on that.
Second question, right? Yeah. Semiconductors, UPI. I love the way such issues, semiconductors, UPI. Okay, next. You had a query? Yeah, I'll come to you in a second. Yeah, microphone's next to you.
Sir, Sridhar from the Asian Age. Sir, what about the people-to-people exchanges, especially...
Sorry. No. People-to-people exchanges.
People-to-people exchanges, especially on pilgrimage and on that specifically.
Discussions.
Yeah.
Okay. There was last... you have more questions? Yeah, Pia? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Pia with
We'll have to close, huh? It's been...
Last month, India's crude oil imports from Russia saw a decline, and some of those volumes were replaced by a sharp surge in imports from Saudi Arabia. In fact, the oil imports from Saudi Arabia rose 63% month on month. Did this feature in the discussions today, especially since both countries have talked a lot about renewable energy and the need to shift towards green energy?
Sir, I didn't get your question. I don't know, sir will answer. I mean, it should be an objection that our increase is going on, and we should be unhappy.
Saudi Arabia has re-emerged as the top oil supplier to India.
Oil supplies. Okay. There's one quick question. Yeah. Supplementary? Yeah. Microphone going behind.
Reza from Hindustan Times. Just a clarification. The Secretary mentioned that there will be a task force for the $100 billion investments.
I think. Was it for the full one or just the West Coast? Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, and he also said there'll be a JWG on the refinery. Are these separate or?
No, JWG on...
Some microphones off, sir. One second.
JWG on education and skill development.
No. I'll take no further questions, sir. Floor.
I think there are many questions, so let me see. One question was asked by Saudi Watan Delhi. See, one of the prime outcomes, of course, Crown Prince visit was two parts. One, of course, as a part of the, G20, and that G20 outcomes have been discussed separately. And one of the outcomes which I mentioned was the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. So that's that. But if I'm here, and for which there was a separate, briefings, everything done, I'm restricting myself to the bilateral part. The bilateral part, as you know, then you see the number of agreements which were signed, 8 agreements which were signed, the resolve of the leadership, to continue to focus on energy cooperation, particularly, in the downstream sector. This was another important area which was there. And the two sides, recognizing each other's economic capabilities in the form of the fastest growing economies and agreeing to work together in future in various areas. This itself is something which I would say noticeable, and there are many areas, these agreements covered. For example, the important agreement which was on energy, which was signed today, I would just give you some elements of it, because that may also help you. This, of course, will cover renewable energy, energy efficiency, hydrogen electricity, petroleum, strategic petroleum reserves, circular carbon economy, and so many fields. So these are many, many areas which are there. A question was asked on visa waivers. Now, visa waiver has not been discussed in the meeting as such, but this was discussed outside of the meeting as a preparation to the meeting. A proposal was made, and both sides started working on this. That means the diplomatic passport holders on both sides, if this agreement is concluded, would not need a visa. Like, this is a very agreement which is there between many countries, but we have with all the GCC countries except with Saudi Arabia. So the Saudi Arabian side is also very keen, but we do hope that in weeks to come this will be done. There are you talk about reforms which are taking place in the kingdom. So of course, these are the questions you should put to the Saudi ministers and others. What are the reforms they are doing? But having served there, we could see that there are large number of reforms which are taking place, and these reforms are all forward-looking. Now, when you go to the first thing which you would notice when you go to the Saudi, any airport, is that so many women at the immigration counters which are there. So I don't think there are the issues which you have talked about. I don't know, in the modern context they are as relevant as these are all international issues and internal issues, and we don't normally comment on any of the internal issues. As far as our own people are concerned, we have always in various mechanisms and various platforms through the embassy and through our discussions have always talked about the welfare of our people. There are various discussions, and you know that we always try and streamline the recruitment process. One of the things which we were able to negotiate with the Saudi side was the removal of the PCC, which really helped large number of people go through. There are separate discussions which are going on the recruitment process, skilling process. So that is something very there. And at the same time, those who may be incarcerated in detention centers in various countries, there are mechanisms, established mechanisms, for their release, depending on what sentences they are. And in many times in these countries, every year, once or twice a year, there are amnesties declared and people come in. So we don't have very many major issues, to talk about. I think you asked a question here about since there has been a surge in the imports from Saudi Arabian oil, was this aspect discussed? It was discussed in the sense that Saudi Arabia remains, the third largest, supplier, at least till this thing, and one of the major, hydrocarbon partners for us. Both sides agreed, as I said, to upgrade the energy partnership, hydrocarbon partnership, into a comprehensive energy partnership, which would mean investment in strategic petroleum reserves and downstream petrochemicals and this refinery project, many such things. So it is an identified fact that both sides recognize each other as very dependable mutual partners. Archives, you have talked about the archives, and you said that we have very precious thing. We are not going to send another Kohinoor to any country, so please be rest assured. This is basically research is there. As you see that we have rich information repositories in India, so it could mean exchange of information on subjects, holding of seminars, holding of visits, exchange of experts. So that will strengthen both sides. So generally this is a very common agreement which countries have. Countries between national archives. This is one such agreement which is there. Semiconductors, who asked? I think somebody asked here. You asked. Semiconductors, Prime Minister mentioned about the opportunities in India for for investments in the semiconductor industry. So basically inviting the Saudi Arabia and other countries to look at the opportunities for investments in semiconductors. UPI, there are discussions which have opened up. We are still in the discussion stage, and but we do hope that, like with other countries where we have been able to make a breakthrough in the UPI, here also we'll be able to make a breakthrough.
People to pilgrims, that had a query.
Pilgrims, I think there was one question on the people-to-people exchange. So one, our Prime Minister congratulated the Saudi side for the successful completion of Hajj, and also mentioned that depending on the capacities in Saudi Arabia, the kingdom would be perhaps should be able to accommodate more number of pilgrims from countries, and including India. So basically that was the context, and the the facilities which are made available to pilgrims from all countries, particularly India. So there are various categories of pilgrims which go, and especially the categories where women were going without male escorts, and those categories and all these things. So it was in the general context it was discussed. The current quota is 175,000, 1,75,000.
No, sorry, this is not a bilateral conversation. Yes, there's a clarification. The common one or separate ones?
There will be, Raza, there will be one working group, joint working group, which will look into all aspects of investments, how to kind of channelize the investments and streamline it in various sectors, and also a specialized committee which would look specifically into the refinery projects and other things.
You had a supplementary on this? Yeah, one second. Yeah. 1 second, let him, microphone.
Sir, did they offer to increase the quota for Indian pilgrims, and any specifics on the figures?
Yes.
Sir, did you say that $5 billion has already been invested in India out of this $100 billion, if I heard you right at the beginning?
$5 billion?
Out of the $100 billion that they are willing to invest, that
no.
I think I heard you say that.
No, I don't think so. No, I think we don't. Anything on the numbers?
You see, the discussion on increase of quota has not come up for discussion, but as you know, the quota depends on the population. So every year before the Hajj, the Saudi authorities ask for population figures, and based on the population of Muslims, 1,000 pilgrims per 1 million of population. That's how the quota is fixed. Yeah.
So thank you very much for your time, sir. I also let me thank Ambassador Suhail Azaz Khan as well as Asim Raja Mahajan, JS Gulf, for the time. Thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you.